Look, I know it's just one word, but I'm totally hung up on it. The fact that after everything that happened, after the disciples bailed on Jesus, not when Jesus went through like a mild inconvenience, but when Jesus got executed by the state, by professional killers, stripped in front of everybody, flogged, beaten, humiliated, all of this stuff. Nobody's there. The disciples aren't there. They all scattered and they left. Now, the women disciples, they hung in with him. Looks like John showed up incognito, but you would think that we're going to have this really ugly moment where we put it all back together that's coming down the pike, like some comeuppance, right? Like when Jesus sees them, you sort of expect the, well, look who came crawling back. Do you have anything you guys want to say to me about your decision making or your courage or lack thereof, as it were? Any apologies, any thoughts at all? Because recently I got executed by professional executioners. Anybody like want to just lead with maybe a simple "I'm sorry"? That's what you'd expect. You'd expect for there to be metaphorical blood that has to be shed to make this thing right. Mountains of "I told you so." And frankly, some hardcore squaring of accounts, probably with a bunch of mean, nasty facetiousness like I was just emulating, but it isn't what we get from Jesus at all. And look, I understand that in the same chapter, like death was conquered and the divide between finite man and infinite God is bridged, and all the things that we saw in the book of Matthew about who Jesus is and the kingdom and the values of the kingdom and the destiny of all of history and where it's all going. All of that stuff was validated and clarified. I get it. That's a big deal. But also, I really think it's a big deal that Jesus, again, this one word, calls them brothers. Those people who bailed on him, it's like he doesn't even want to sort it out. It's like there just ain't nothing that needs to be said. Let's just get on with it. So the angel shows up and tells the women who are at the tomb, who were faithful and who were there the whole time, tells them, I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He ain't here. Look at the place where he was laying, and it's just folded up. That's all neat and good to go. So here's what you need to do now. You need to go tell the disciples that he's risen and he's going ahead of you into Galilee, and there you'll see him. And then the women are like, okay, we should do that because that glowing angel said to. And they're walking down the road, and then Jesus is there, and he says, greetings. And they're like, I know who you are. And they run over and they fall at his feet. And then Jesus reiterates the instruction. Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. That isn't how things work. There's such a thing as relational equity. There's such a thing as relational debts. But Jesus just calls them brothers. Now, if I'm the disciples here, I'm like, okay, he said he was going to come back to life. I mean, he might. I hope so. That would be pretty cool. If I'm them, I've been working on a speech. I've been sitting in my little thatched roof cottage or my hovel or whatever. I'm like, okay, Jesus, you are the best. And I should have known all along that you would come back to life. But my faith wavered and I was afraid. And in a moment of weakness, I know I left you hung out to dry. And I can't imagine what you've been through. And if there's any way you can allow me to make it up to you or anything I can do to prove to you how, maybe I'd be working on something like that, right? You've sat around and workshopped make things right speeches before. Well, such an impulse is not a new one. All the way back in Genesis, we get this incident between a couple of brothers descended from Abraham, well, closely descended from Abraham. This is Jacob and Esau, the sons of Isaac. Isaac, of course, is the son of Abraham. And these people have got a weird family. They came up with weird ways to produce offspring. I can't imagine what Thanksgiving was like at the Abraham household. But despite all of that weirdness, we get to a place where two estranged brothers are on a collision course with each other in Genesis. Looks like it's 33. Jacob is a hustler. He's always coming up with ideas and schemes for how to outmaneuver his brother Esau, who seems pretty steady. But again, we're talking about the ancient Near East. Values were a little different. Right, wrong, ideal, character traits that was viewed differently than you would think of them now. So Genesis is a little tricky to read, But basically, it looks like Jacob gets one over on Esau and ends up hijacking Esau's blessing and birthright. And then Jacob has to get out of Dodge. He has to run away because he inappropriately got his mitts on an inheritance in the wrong way. And so he goes way, way off to another land, and he's gone for 14 years plus travel time, a really long time. And that's 14 years to sit around and stew on things for Esau, who got cheated, and for Jacob, who, without really any explanation or patching things up, just disappeared and abandoned his brother. Well, now Jacob has been schemed by his father-in-law, Laban, who tricks him into working an extra 7 years for him. That's a remarkable story for another time. But Jacob tricks Laban back. A lot of tricking in these chapters. That's sort of the theme of Jacob. And now Jacob has to get out of Dodge again. He's a man without a country, and the only place that he can really go is back to his home country. And he knows who he's going to run into there. It's going to be Esau. And the whole way, Jacob, no doubt, is working on his speech. I did a vile thing to you, brother. If there's any way that we could be reconciled, please tell me. And then this is what happens when they run into each other. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. Esau came with armed dudes. So Jacob divided his children among Leah and Rachel. He has 2 wives because this is a weird time and they did weird things. And the 2 maidservants. He put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. Jacob's taking steps because he knows this is the kind of situation where you get a reckoning, and he better just hope that his speech and gesticulations he's been brainstorming for months of walking across the desert are going to work on his brother so that Esau won't punish him and his family. Jacob himself went on ahead and bowed down on the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. So this guy's humiliating himself in front of everybody. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. All of the people who look up to him as the head of a household, which is really more like the mayor of a moving town, like a low-level king, chieftain, warlord, whatever you want to call him, they're all seeing him prostrating himself like this in the dirt. Like, whoa, we've never got that kind of behavior. So he's given up social equity in front of his own people. He's given up social equity in front of the people he's going to meet. And then verse 4. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" And then Jacob's like, "That's my family, man. It's been so dang long," and I understand he's not saying this, but this is what now it's paraphrased, now it's me. It's been so dang long, and it's such a relief to just introduce you to my family. And I understand that the reason we haven't been together, the reason we're estranged, is because of me and what I did and the decisions that I made. And that hug, that embrace from his brother, can you imagine what that felt like? Have you ever received something like that? Obviously, that same motif is in view when Jesus tells a very famous story in Luke 15 that would have reminded the original audience of the Jacob and Esau thing. That's the prodigal son. It's a parable about a kid who inappropriately gets his mitts on an inheritance, just like Jacob did. And then because of that, has to go somewhere else. And so the kid in the prodigal son story goes away and lives foolishly and recklessly and without reconciliation with his family, with his father. And finally, he hits rock bottom and he's like, even my dad's servants live better than this. I'm going to go back. And he works on a speech in Luke 15 as he's walking back home. He's like, all right, okay, I think I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to go to him and I'm going to say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. But when he was still a long ways off, the father sees him and he's filled with compassion for his son. And the father's like, forget this. I'm not waiting for him to walk all the way down this dusty road and embarrass himself in front of everybody. I want him to know from the second we can make eye contact with each other that he's in. And so the dad embarrasses himself in front of all of his servants and his whole compound and family and everybody. He goes running down the road and he embraces his kid just like Esau embraced Jacob, even though Jacob didn't deserve it and even though this kid doesn't deserve it. And the son, probably just blubbering, is trying to get the story out. He's like, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And the father's like, shut up, paraphrases mine. Kill the fattened calf. We're having a feast. This kid's not dressed like a member of my household. Get him the fancy robe. Where's the ring that indicates that he's my cherished son and child and heir? Get that ring on his finger right now. And the father's like, the son of mine was dead, and now he's back alive. And that really is what estrangement is like, when you screw something up bad and you wreck a relationship. And so when we get back over to Matthew 28 and we see a situation that is, I think, equal in terms of offense here, Matthew, who's one of those offenders, and the way he presents the last few chapters of his book makes it really clear he views it as a massive offense. But where you would expect an airing of grievances and some justice to be doled out, instead, you simply get Esau's embrace. You simply get the prodigal father running down the road and wrapping his arms around the son. And what you get right here by Jesus' use of this term brothers, an indication from this one sentence that we're moving forward, we have things to do together, and we're a family of faith. What you get here is kind of the first payoff theologically of what just happened at the cross and in the resurrection. Why does that work? Why does that make sense? Why does it actually make more sense than having a big fight? The offense that these disciples just inflicted against God has been paid for. That debt is resolved, just like Jesus said in what he just did. It's fixed. So it's not just Jesus being the bigger man. I mean, that's awesome when we see a story like that, like we get with Jacob and Esau, but it's kind of the completion of the story of Jacob and Esau. Because now this reconciliation is being made whole. It's paid for. It's done. The offenses are as far as the east is from the west. And I think Jesus' use of this little word brother right here is a huge and easy to overlook detail that demonstrates that now we're in a different place than we were before the cross and the resurrection. And this looks like the values of the kingdom culminating and becoming visible in the world and in relationships and relationship between God and man. And it's beautiful. That's all I got. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.